Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and in this video let's check out the latest in what is possibly the most sophisticated and most complete study level simulations of any general aviation aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I am of course talking about the brand new Black Square simulations, Steam Gauge Overhaul, Analog Bonanza. And the entire Steam Gauge Overhaul series, for those of you who are not familiar, is basically an overhaul of some default Microsoft Flight Simulator aircraft, like the Caravan, the King Air, and now the Bonanza, but basically redoing the entire aircraft system-wise, and the only thing that's left from the original is the outside model. So, key features of the Black Square Steam Gauge Analog aircraft includes swappable radio stacks, complete system simulations including circuit breakers. They include stuff like, for example, old school style RNAV computers, while at the same time having the possibility to fit in the GTN 750 or of course the GNS 530 and 430 simulations. So very, very complex aircraft here, and indeed I would say probably among the closest to study level simulations that we have. Alright, let's hop into the cockpit and have a look at our aircraft. This is our Bonanza. Those of you who've flown the default A36 Bonanza will probably be aware that this somewhat looks familiar. However, believe me, inside it is something completely different. So let's get into it. Today's plan is to show you the airplane in a couple of traffic patterns, then we'll take it en route, go flying, and we'll see how it navigates along the route. So the first thing we need to decide on is, of course, which radios do we want in our aircraft, because we have a couple different options here. Currently I've fitted the GTN 750, but we can also use the GNS 530, or we can just carry no GPS at all and use some default avionics over here. But for us today, let's take the GTN 750. Also we can swap the COM2 unit over here, so we can for example install a GNS 430 down here, but I'm going to go with this setup as we've fitted it into the airplane right now. Loads of features in this one. But the one that I'm appreciating the most is the correctly simulated turbocharger simulation. And in single-engine piston aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator, this is probably a first that we got a correctly working turbocharger. Now, to be entirely correct, this is not a turbocharged, but a turbo-normalized airplane, which means that the turbocharger is basically not capable of providing more than sea level pressure. However, it does that all the way up to approximately 20,000 feet, depending on which source you look up. The actual value is of course dependent on outside conditions, but we'll have a look into that in the flight. So, a couple of basic data then about our airplane. This is the turbocharged version of the Bonanza, which has a maximum cruising speed of 216 knots true airspeed, a normal cruising speed of 194 and an economy speed of 151. So that's quite some power that we have under the hood. Maximum range is almost 900 nautical miles, and with tip tanks fitted, as we have it on this particular airplane, the maximum range is even almost 1,300 nautical miles, which is several hours of flying. The service ceiling 25,000 feet, which means you can climb above most of the weather. Alright, starting this up is actually quite complex because it features several different startup problems that you can encounter when you're starting up an airplane like this. So we are going to be using, at least as a reference, the standard InSim checklist. And the reason I want to show you this is not only because it has all the features that the normal InSim checklist has, but because there are several different checklists available. For example, starting a cold engine, starting a hot engine, starting a flooded engine. Even some emergency checklists like engine fire on the ground, and so on. If we go all the way down, we can see that there is a lot of interesting checklists in here, like severe icing encounter and so on. or carbon monoxide detected. Now, the interesting thing here is the plane actually has a working carbon monoxide detector fitted to this airplane. So, loads of features, and we're going to explore most of them in the flight. But for now, let's take it easy, and let's go with the before starting engines checklist to get going. So, pre-flight inspection is complete, the seatbelts secured, cabin door latched, park and brake, you can find that one down here, is set, emergency gear handle stowed, you can find that one down here, and going on, avionic breakers all in, that's the circuit breaker set we have down here, and as you can see they're all operable. And then we can also check our secondary, or rather our main circuit breakers, which we have over here, and they are also, let's go down here, all fitted. An easy way to see if a circuit breaker is popped is they have this colored marking down at the bottom, so if you go down to your eye level of the circuit breaker, then you can easily see it down there. So the flaps are up, checking the oxygen pressure, that should be between 1550 and 1850 psi. Now this is actually a little bit lower because I used my oxygen on an earlier flight, and the airplane remembers this. You can refill that using the options on the weather radar display, but I'll show you that in a few moments. So avionics are off, the throttles are closed, mixture full rich and props full forward. Cowl flaps open, aileron trim centered, alternate air off, firewall valves all in, cabin heat off, and yes, this airplane actually does simulate cabin temperatures, and you have of course a cabin temperature gauge over here, but you also have this little cabin temperature light showing you if your cabin is too cold or too hot, so you actually need to manage this live, and there are several ways to do so. We have the air conditioning system and the blowers up here, then we have cabin heaters down here, and all of these work in a really well simulated way, but we'll talk about that in a few moments. So, the main panel switches are basically all off, magnetos off, landing gear down, and the trim is in neutral. Okay, so, let's go ahead and start the airplane up. Beacon light on, battery master switch on. So we check bus volts 23 minimum, this is at 25 at the moment. Then annunciators. Tested, and they're all working. Okay, primary altimeter on, standby alternator on, main fuel tank quantities. From down here we're currently at 50%, that shall be good enough for us. So now we are going to check the fuel pumps and the standby gyro, so listen very carefully that they're operating. While checking the standby gyro, make sure the instrument air is actually rising, which it does. So with that we've basically completed our before start procedures. So let's go ahead and start the engine. We currently have a cold engine, and we can basically see that by looking at the cylinder head temperatures, which are below the 50s. They're between 100 and 50, you want to use the hot checklist, and you will see that they are actually quite different, and if you don't start your engine up correctly, the engine is not going to start. Alright, so, our engine is cold, so let's go. Mixture full rich, props full forward, throttle full open. Then aux fuel pump high for 2 to 3 seconds. Observe the fuel flow. Now we've got 2 to 3 seconds complete. Aux pump off, throttle open about half an inch. And then let's go ahead and start that engine up. So, clear prop. And here we go. So adjust the throttle to get approximately between 1000 and 1200 RPMs, which we do right now. And then let's go ahead with the next checklist, which is going to be the after start checklist. Throttle 1000 to 1200, then the oil pressure is checked down here. We don't have any warnings showing. Alternator load is below 25 amps, it actually is. And bus voltage 28, we can see that down here, that's roughly in the region, yeah. Engine instruments checked, make sure we are getting oil temperature slowly, all pressure is there, that's the most important after you started the engine. The cylinder temperature is slowly going to rise, and the rest of it looks good. Throttle between 1000 to 1200 RPMs looks good as well. So, I told you earlier that we should quickly have a look into the weather radar. So let's go ahead and start up the avionics. And the reason I'm saying the weather radar is because we actually mostly want to look into the different options that we have available in here. Now, just before I do that, something very important we need to do up here is to lean the engine on the ground, otherwise you will get spark plug fouling. And if we actually turn this one on to the options and wait for the self-test to complete, thereafter we are going to see that the engine does actually wear out over time if you mistreat it. And I've flown my plane now for about 2.5 hours and I've got it down to 85%, so, well, I should probably check that engine. However, what I want to show you over here is, I told you earlier on a previous flight we used up some of the oxygen that we had, so it's down to 1500 psi right now. So if we want to refuel this, we can simply do it down here. And now you can see I've pressed the refill button, now it's back to 1850 psi, so like that we can go above level 100 again and have oxygen available. Alright, so up here we have a lot of different menus, like we can set the global failure rate. This airplane features over 80 major failures that are simulated, so there is a lot that you can play around with over here, especially when you are studying to become a general aviation pilot. Then this airplane offers you a lot of different possibilities for your studies. Alright. Nonetheless, for this particular video, I'll just keep the random failures enabled as I always have. And just to show you, in here we'd have many different options available. However, we don't plan to use any of those today. So let's flick the weather radar back to standby. Also, quick setup of the GTN 750. As always, I'm using the unit that is based on the Garmin trainer over here, so the TDS. So that provides the most complete simulation. That provides the most complete simulation of the GTN 750 that we can possibly think of. Okay, consumer license, yep, that is what I have. And we can keep the transponder on. Squawk code, we are flying in Germany, is 7000 for VFR. And that is basically the setup. Note over here, cabin temperature currently 34 Fahrenheit or 1 degree centigrade, which is pretty much the outside temperature, and that's quite cold, so you're normally not supposed to do it on the ground, but I'll just put the cabin heat on to start warming this thing up a little bit. Alright, we have pretty much prepared our airplane for taxi, so let's go ahead and first of all have a look at the wind suck, which we can see over here. So we've got to turn over to the right. We're currently at Regensburg Airport, and this is a pretty simplistic airport, so not a lot of taxiways or runways or whatever. So park and brake is off. We need to go uphill here a little bit, so let's just bring in a little bit of extra power. Normally the plane rolls quite well without the need to go more than 1200 RPMs, but since we have to go uphill here a little bit, we needed a bit more power there. Also, I like to put my viewpoint up a little bit into a viewpoint that I've always used while I've been flying general aviation aircraft, so I always like the rather high seating position in them. So let's go ahead and use that for today's flight as well. As you can see, now that we're no longer going uphill, if I put my engine to about 1000 RPM down here, the plane is actually accelerating a tiny bit while we're rolling, making things quite easy to handle here. The ground behavior, the taxi behavior of the plane has changed totally compared to the default Bonanza, so especially due to the new engine model, the thing just feels realistic while you taxi it. Alright, let's line the plane up on the runway over here. Come on. I've just taken it all the way to the edge over here. But, here we go. Alright, not the best lineup I've ever done, but we're getting there. And that's it. Okay, cool. So, let's set the park and brake and do the run-up. Doing the run-up is really important here because, as I showed you earlier, the engine does wear out over the time, so you need to do inspections and repair it as applicable, especially when you mistreat the plane. But, for now, we've got to do those run-ups if we don't want to check the menu all the time, in order to find out if everything is working correctly. So, starting the run-up procedure, and I'll actually start it by setting up all my instruments. We're located at Regensburg Airport, so that's Echo Delta November Romeo, and the elevation is 1298, so let's turn that altimeter down. And the same on the standby set of altimeters. The plane is fully IFI equipped, so we've got a full set of standby instruments in here. So, initially runway heading is going to be 280, let's quickly set that up as well. Course selected 280 as well. And then we can start our run-up procedures now. Again, we've got a very good checklist for that. So let's start right here. Park and brake set, annunciators. Test and considered once more. There is none illuminated at the moment, that's good. Remote compass, slaved and aligned, that's set over here, and we are showing the correct runway heading of 280. So then let's go ahead and start our run-up. Put the mixture into rich. Throttles up to 1700 RPMs, and you will notice, as I increase my thrust, which you can directly see on the manifold pressure, how the RPM lags behind a little bit. And that is actually quite a nice thing there. The entire engine handling feels very close to the turbocharged engine that I have flown in the Seneca in my IFR and multi-engine training. Okay, we've got 1700 RPM, so we are gonna cycle the props now, and at 1400 I'm going to increase the props again. So, number one. And we're gonna do that thing 3 times. On the next one, we want to see the manifold pressure. Here we go. And you can see that slight increase in the manifold pressure there. And finally, we're gonna check for the oil pressure, which is going to see a small surge there as well. So let's do that once more. And watch the oil pressure dropping over there. Okay, cool. We wait for the entire thing to run back up to 1700 RPMs, and now we can check the magnetos, which should have 150 RPM drop maximum. So into the right. Observe that RPMs, they dropped about 100. Back to both. They come back up. To the left. Falling back down. And then back to both. So, instrument air down here is showing in green. So, let's now go ahead and check the alternators. You can see we've got a bit of an alternator load showing up here. So, turn the primary off, and that one goes to 0. Now we're going to switch the load meter to secondary, and you can see the secondary is actually very highly loaded. And therefore you can also see the standby alternator light illuminating up there. So, let's go ahead and switch the standby off as well. Goes down to 0, and now we can put the load meter back on primary and turn the 2 alternators back on. Going on from there, we can see we are roughly at just below 25. So let's turn on the propeller de-ice and observe the current and the huge load that this poses on the alternators. So that's working correctly, and then we can turn the prop heat back off. Throttles back down to 1200 RPMs. Now here's something that I just want to show you how sophisticated this engine simulation is. And if I open that window now, First of all, you can hear the sound of the turbocharger running in the background there. And that is not just a pre-recorded sound that just always runs, but this is actually a very sophisticated simulation in that the sound is mixed live on the fly as the engine RPMs change. But the reason I opened the window is I wanted to show you a little rookie mistake that will have consequences in this plane. And that is, if during the magneto check I don't just put it to right, but accidentally to off, and then right back on again, you will hear the engine backfire. Well, or at least you're supposed to. Of course, show effect, I can't recreate it right now, but the developer has shown pretty nicely how that works in his video, so let's just see if I can do that one more time. No. Okay, I can't recreate it right now, that is unfortunate, but well, even better if I can't fail my engine, is it? Well, if I can't fail my engine, it sounds wrong, but I could. Okay, anyway, back to standard taxi RPMs. Linking the mixture once more, you don't have to at this point anymore, but since we are about to do a couple more exercises over here to check that our airplane is fit to fly, I just want them to be leaned out in order not to damage the engine. So, electric trim test, we can see our trim indicator down here, and that is working, as you can see. Then next up we're going to test the autopilot, and for that we put the heading bug somewhere off to the left here, 30 degrees off. Then put the autopilot on in heading mode, engage, watch the flight director turn and watch the autopilot turn the control column. Gonna do the same into the other direction here. And you can see how the autopilot once again reacts correctly to this. Next up, the disengages. First switch disengages autopilot, second one kills the flight director, and then we are just going to turn it on once more, and this time we'll override it manually with the joystick to check that we can actually disconnect the autopilot, as you can see over here, by overpowering it. That's just a safety test to make sure that we can actually kill the autopilot in any situation where we might want to. Okay, flaps. Let's get them down. Get them back up again. Alright, and we are going to do a takeoff with the flaps in the first position here. So, finally, check the instruments. Altimeter reads correctly. Heading bug, we can synchronize that once more with the runway heading. And lights are set. And finally, we can release the brakes and then start our takeoff run. Okay, so that's pretty much everything set, and our routing, initially we'll fly out to the south towards the river Donau, and then we're going to follow that one southbound. But I'm going to show you the flight plan as we are in flight. And it's just gotten a little hot there in the cockpit, so we're actually gonna switch that. We're actually gonna switch that heat off again. Patron altitude is 2,300, we'll climb straight away to 5,500 because this airplane got a huge climb performance, and you'll see that in a moment. So that's everything on, then park and brake is off, mixture going full rich, and now watch as I'm increasing power, how it would be quite easy with a turbocharger to overboost the engine, so I'm actually increasing power quite slowly there. Just about to the red line, but not above that. 71 knots, rotate. Okay, tap the brakes, gear up, and we're flying. Best rated climb somewhere around 96 knots, so I'm just about to hold that, and we are 400 feet above the field elevation, flaps up, and fuel pump off. Okay, we are well clear of the Patron altitude at 2300, so let's turn southbound. Make sure we don't overfly any of the farmlands down here, or any of the farmers' houses, much rather. They're typically not that happy about it. Alright, we can see the River Donau over there already, so I'm just about flying around that village over here, and then we'll make our way southbound along the Donau. The Bonanza is not certified for flight into known icing conditions. However, there are a couple of very nice features that I want to show you relating to icing, so I'm just about going to keep our course over here, and I'll fly us right into that cloud. This is of course something that you would definitely not do in real life. Also, something to be aware of, this is a turbocharged engine, or a turbo-normalized one, so we are just about going to keep the power set at maximum for the entirety of the climb. And look at that huge rate of climb there. So, transition altitude, set standard, passing 5.8, climbing, well, quite a bit higher for now. Just about want to demonstrate those icing effects by taking the plane into the clouds. And watch that superb rate of climbing of a sustained 2,000 feet a minute. We're currently at 50% load, and we've got 2 people sitting in the plane, so it's a medium-ish payload, and the rate of climb is just superb. So, we are getting into the icing conditions now. Let's turn the propeller de-ice on and watch how the windows over here are slowly freezing up. I'm going to stop the climb over here because we don't actually want to pick up some ice. But let's go ahead and turn the defroster on, and when we put the defroster fully on, then we will see that the windows are soon going to clear up once again. Right, flight level 7.5, and we can see the Donau roughly through the iced up windows down there. So let's go ahead and exit the icing conditions again. And once we're out of the icing conditions, the ice is going to be melted away by the defroster. Okay, in the meantime, this video is not going to be too much about the GTN 750, however, since it is the primary suit of avionics that we have with this airplane, let's quickly go ahead here and enter a little shortcut. So, our flight today is going to lead us towards the southeast, to Deggendorf. And I'm going to show you that little flight plan right here, right now, provided I can find my Navigraph chart window. Here it is. So that's our routing that we're about to fly. Track 116, 37 nautical miles, and we can see that we've got a superbly fast airplane, so that's going to be quite a quick flight there. I'm going to navigate southbound towards the Donau, and then we'll follow that along the river all the way to our destination. The destination Echo Delta Mike Whiskey, so let's quickly go ahead and insert that one into the GPS. Direct to waypoint Echo Delta Mike Whiskey Deggendorf. Enter, activate, and the routing's pretty much straight ahead. Now here's something interesting for those of you who are not so familiar with the way how these GPSs work. Basically, the scale on our HSI now shows us the off-track situation, but the GPS is not actually able to select the course for us, so we still have to do this manually. Also note the cabin temperature has fallen to 9 degrees already, so let's put on the cabin heat once again. And with the cabin heat and the defroster on, it takes a little while for the windows to clear up, but you can see how it's happening just now. Alright. So we're on the way. We've pretty much flown the airplane entirely manually so far. Let's go ahead and select our cruise power. The Bonanza is a fast airplane, so select manifold pressure here of 25 inches, and then the RPM I've reduced to 25 inches just about now as well. So let's take a little moment to discover the features of the autopilot in this airplane. Matching that route once more. Okay. Let's start easy. We'll take nav mode, we take altitude hold, and we've got the flight director available to guide us. So far, so easy. Let's put the autopilot on, and now the autopilot takes over. However, in Germany, if we want to fly VFR above 5,000 feet, we need to follow the semicircular rules, so we've got to climb 5,500. There are a couple of different ways to do this. We can either use vertical speed mode, which we find up here, and if we pull this out, we can select our target vertical speed, for example, of 1,000 feet a minute. Now, that is a very easy way to do this. Another way, we can disengage the altitude mode and then use the up and down buttons up here to select our target pitch. And that way, once you make sure that you have actually deselected altitude mode, pressing the up button, we can simply set our target pitch, and like that, the airplane is going to intercept the target altitude by the time we get there, pretty much like what we're used to. Let's go vertical speed once more. Give me 1,000 feet a minute, get me up to that altitude. And once we're up at altitude, we want to discover another feature of this airplane, which is probably the favorite feature of the developer, according to his feature preview video. And that is the engine monitor that we have in here. So, this airplane comes with a neat little gauge that you are going to find down here, which is the engine monitor. And I'm going to show you a couple of the interesting features that this one has available right now. So, we'll start very easy. The JPI EDM 800 engine monitor can show us a lot of useful information, but let's first of all understand the indications. We've got the horsepower setting of the engine up here, and that is the setting that we currently get. Then down here we have several different informations that we can step through, and up here we can select a couple different modes like EGT, then we've got all, and then we've got fuel flow. So that's the different stuff that you can bring up on this system. In the middle we have the cylinder head temperature of the different 6 cylinders in our engine. So for now, let's go ahead and do the following. First of all, get rid of that defroster and put the cabin air to something in the middle, because it's 27 degrees in the cabin already. And now, let's go ahead and do the following. We're going to start leaning our airplane, and this thing gets us great guidance when leaning the plane. Just notice the performance parameters right now without any leaning, and do note that since it is a turbo normalized airplane, you don't actually need to lean until you pass the critical altitude, which is somewhere around 20,000 feet. Below that, you can keep the mixture in full ridge at all times. But let's start leaning in order to save a bit of money. We can see up here we're using almost 18 gallons per hour right now. And if we now go ahead and click the lean find button on lean R means to lean to the richest point of view. I'm going to reduce my mixture setting right now, and we can watch the cylinder head temperatures rise over there. Eventually, when we've passed the peak, we get this, which is the leanest information. So now, we've reached the leanest point in the mixture. However, we want to find the richest possible one. So now we're going to increase the mixture again, and watch the horsepowers up here in the top of the indicator. So I'm going to increase this now, and you can watch the lower left number, the 50 currently, decrease now. And once that is in the region somewhere around minus 50 or so, that means we're leaning to a colder temperature, we will have the maximum horsepower. Of course, you get the most accurate number by just watching the horsepower readout up there, and I'm increasing the mixture right now, and we can see now it's dropping again. So somewhere around 230 horsepower at the current setup, so at the current thrust and prop settings, is about the best we're going to get out of this. So now let's go ahead and find the most economic cruise setting. So we press step, we go to lean find again, and then in the real one you'd have to hold both buttons at the same time. In the virtual one there's a click spot right there in the middle. Now we're on the leanest. So let's go ahead and start pulling our mixture out again, until eventually the computer is going to tell us that we've reached... Here we go. Now I've got the richest setting up here. And now watch our fuel flow. We've significantly reduced the fuel flow compared to the previous. And if you keep in mind the price of a gallon of fuel at the moment, that's a really useful tool there. Alright, apart from that, going down to fuel flow, we've got a bit of stuff here, like currently... Let's go ahead, that's the remaining. And what we are looking for is this. Currently we're using currently we can fly 12.8 nautical miles per gallon of fuel. Also, it tells us our remaining endurance, which is 3 hours and 27 minutes. And like that, we can basically cycle ourselves through here. So that's quite a bit of interesting stuff there that makes you able to manage your engine in the most economic way. So, going up to the EGT setting, there is basically one setting that's interesting for us, and that is this one over here. And once we're about to start our descent, you will see the temperatures dropping. And you should not let this drop below -70, otherwise you need to start playing with the cowl flaps in order to control the engine temperatures. And that is in order to avoid damaging your engines. Okay, we're 8 nautical miles from our destination airport, so we could either start the descent right now, or we go ahead and play with the airplane a little bit more. So let me just about turn all the de-icing on that we have available up here, and looking at the clouds, oh, there seems to be a little hole in the clouds there, so let's go ahead and fly this thing manually a bit more. So, I'm about to resume the climb, so first of all mixture it, props full forward, and then increase the manifold pressure, right back up to the limit. Let's go ahead and find a little hole in the clouds, so that we can actually see the high altitude performance of the Bonanza. And now is where the turbocharger really shines. I'm about to pull the plane back down to 96 knots, which is the speed for the best rated climb. Sorry, for the best angle of climb over here. And you will see that we don't need to lean anything anymore until we reach about 20,000 feet of altitude. Now, for the purpose of this video, let's not go all the way to 20,000, because that would just be a very long climb that I'm sure many of you would not be that interested in. But what we are going to do for the purpose of this video is we'll just about climb up to something like 15,000 or so to show you the general principle of how the turbocharger works. Also, as we're approaching 10,000 feet, let's flick on our oxygen. And if you listen very, very carefully, you can actually hear the sound of the oxygen flowing in the background. It's a very, very quiet whistling sound, but it is audible, and that is something that I really appreciate about this airplane. Alright, we've climbed 3,000 feet, and you can see the manifold pressure is still totally unchanged. The turbocharger is performing really well here and keeping our engine at the target settings, while at the same time we are getting our airplane up to a higher altitude. Really nice climb performance there. As you can see, something in the region 2,000 feet sustained without losing a lot of airspeed there, so that's a really good thing. Something we just about have to do to change our fuel tanks. We've used quite a bit from the left tank, so let's start changing this to the right tank. Fuel pump on, change it over down here, and then we can switch the fuel pump off again, and now we're operating on the right hand tank. Alright, we're above 10,000. Our engine power is still working as normal and as designed. It is worth mentioning, by the way, that there are several variants of the Bonanza that come with this add-on. So, we are flying the turbo normalized version right now, but there are also versions without a turbocharger that operate like the normal piston engine that you are used to. Alright, so as you can see, still 2,000 feet a minute sustained rate of climb there, which is something that I really appreciate. Now, once we've leveled off at 15,000 feet, I'm going to show you a little trick there, how to determine the true airspeed that you're actually flying. Keep in mind, for navigational purposes, what you're interested in is not the indicated airspeed of the plane, which, as altitude increases, is going to get more and more less accurate. More and more less accurate, that sounds interesting. Well, it's going to get less accurate because the true airspeed increases, which is the one that we are really interested in, while we are maintaining a constant indicated airspeed. So we've got 1,000 to go, and the interesting thing is that in most of the airspeed indicators we see in general aviation aircraft within the flight simulator, one can actually quite easily dial in the true airspeed, but a lot of flight simmers actually don't really seem to know about this. So I'm going to show you how we can do this in a moment. So let's level off at 15,000 up here. Might as well dial that in as target altitude, even though that's just a reminder. Here we go, 15,000. Alright, let's level off over here. Let's use an economy cruise power setting up here, so something that is really just for, you know, flying around without covering a lot of distance. So I'm just going to use 20 inches of manifold pressure and 2,000 RPMs. That works really nice close to the ground. I haven't actually tried it up that high yet, but I would expect something in the region of around 120 knots of airspeed over here. And that, of course, is just to conserve a little bit of fuel. As I told you earlier, the plane is able to fly a lot faster than that. So, we are about leveling off. Something that I might as well do at this point is to trim the aileron, because the plane does have a little bit of a tendency there to start rolling. I'm sure you've seen me correcting that pretty much all the time in this video so far. But that was just because I was too lazy to actually trim the aileron. Okay, this looks quite good. Now we're trimmed out, 15,000 feet. We've got our nice economy cruise power set there. Let's quickly go ahead and lean that airplane once more. So we'll start on the ridge side for maximum power. Okay, reducing mixture as we speak. So we found the leanest, so let's increase that again to the maximum horsepower setting, which we have just about found. Okay then, we're gonna do that once again, this time to find the most economic cruise power setting. So lean L. Now we can reduce this. And as you can see, at some point here it says ridges. And now we're using something in the region of roughly 9 gallons per hour of fuel, which is quite a bit less than what we've previously been using, isn't it? So, as you can see, let's cycle ourselves through that stuff over here. And I actually want to see the fuel values. So now we can fly 22.4 miles per gallon of fuel. And with that, we have an endurance of 5 hours 42 right now, with basically the tanks just below half, and halfway filled tip tanks. Talking about the tip tanks, by the way, let's go ahead and start transferring fuel from the tip tanks into the main tanks. So we're going to flick this on. We observe the green lights. Now the plane is basically transferring fuel from the tip tanks that we have up here into the main tanks, which is from where the engine is able to actually use that fuel. Okay, so I've been talking quite a bit about some other systems again, because this is just such a complex airplane. And there is just so much to actually talk about. But let's go ahead and figure out how fast are we actually flying in terms of true airspeed. And in order to figure that out, first of all we need the outside air temperature, which is currently minus 20 degrees centigrade. And then, if we look at the scales up here on the speed indicator, we can up here basically see the temperature, and below that is the altitude. So now, let's rotate that until we see 15,000 on the minus 10 mark, on the minus 20 marker, which is what we have over here. And as you can see, 140 knots indicated would now equal 180 knots true airspeed. So if we take that down a bit, even with the economy power cruise setting that we have right now, we are doing roughly 160 knots true airspeed. So let's try and accelerate the plane and see how fast we can actually get at a decent cruise power setting. So, as always, when increasing power, mixture, prop, and we're gonna go to 2500 RPMs here. Notice how I need to correct the flight path of the plane here as it reacts to the aerodynamic changes of increasing engine power. And here we go. So let's see how fast we can actually get this now. In the meantime, let me do a 180 degree turn, target heading 300, so that we slowly can get close towards our destination airport once again. Plane started climbing a little bit, let's correct for that, get back down to 15,000. Alright, and by now we've reached 190 knots true airspeed. That's quite an incredible speed for a single engine aircraft, isn't it? And we can even add a couple more inches in manifold up there. So right now the power is 25 again. Let's see what we can achieve with that. And in the meantime, roll wings level and maintain that altitude here. So yeah, here we go. 195 knots true airspeed. That's about what we can get from this plane. That's quite nice, isn't it? In the meantime, you see me constantly fiddling with the cabin heaters down here. And obviously, in real life, it would be quite a bit easier to control cabin temperature because you can feel everything. In the sim, we have the two little lights up here which constantly remind you if the temperature is either cold or if the temperature is high. But of course, you know, that's still a tiny bit more difficult than if we were just about to feel everything like we would in real life. Okay, there is one thing worth mentioning over here, as I'm constantly playing with the cabin heaters, and that is that in real piston-driven aircraft, there is quite a good chance that parts of the heating system are going to rupture, and the cabin might be filled with carbon monoxide, which, as everybody of us knows, is highly poisonous. That's the reason why pretty much any airplane that has a cabin heating installed of this category got a carbon monoxide detector. And we've actually got one down here which is fully simulated. So, first of all, the ruptures in the heating system are simulated and can happen. And secondly, if that happens, we've actually got a working carbon monoxide detector which is going to alert us of that problem. If that happens, well, we've got the checklist over here, so let's have a quick look into what we would actually do then. So carbon monoxide detected. Firewall valve close, which is the one that we have down here, the red one. Then cabin air and heat close, which is fully pushed in. CO detector reset, and if the alarm persists, throttle close, mixture cut off, propeller low RPM, magnetos off, window open, cabin air full open, and turn off any non-essential equipment. So basically what this checklist achieves there, the steps that I just read out, is shut down the engine, shut down any electrical device that drains your battery unnecessarily, and then you're going to glide your airplane back to the ground. That's just how dangerous it is. Alright, so we've had a pretty nice time finding our way through a hole in the clouds on the way up. But of course, as always, once you're above the clouds, those little holes, as we see them down here, vanish, and now we're basically stuck above a mostly closed cloud cover. But the plane is fully IFR equipped, so we could easily descend back through the clouds under IFR flight rules in order to get back down to our destination legally. At the moment, there is no ATC online on Watson where I'm currently flying, so we'll just about have to assume that air traffic control is helping us here. However, keep in mind the airplane is not certified for a flight into known icing conditions, so you can only do this when the weather is good enough that icing is not to be expected. In our case, unfortunately we are expecting icing today, so let's go ahead and find a little hole in the clouds here where we can pop through in order to get back down. And we can see something right down here, which is probably a little bit close though. I'm just about reducing my power a little bit again, in order not to gain too much airspeed on the way down. This looks like a big hole over there, doesn't it? Of course it would not be legal to go through there, as we are not able to maintain the distance from the clouds that we need. But, you know how general aviation works, do you? Of course I would never do this in real life, just as a small disclaimer there. Something to be aware of as we're descending the plane. You can easily get some 2,000 or 3,000 feet a minute there if you bring the engine back down to idle and maintain your high airspeed. However, keep in mind the cabin is not pressurized, so that's the reason why we are using oxygen down here. And since the cabin is not pressurized, you generally don't want to descend at much more than 1,000 feet a minute, otherwise it is going to become quite heavy on your ears. So we can see the ground down there, so let's go ahead and use that little hole to pop through the clouds. As we are descending, let's keep a good eye on our EDM 800 to monitor the engine temperatures. We can see this is currently at -29, which is still fine, but if this were to go anywhere in the region of about -70, then we would consider closing our cowl flaps. Alright, so I hope that nobody flying with us today has got a cold, because I am about to dive this plane down here in order to demonstrate the cabin temperature, the engine temperatures there. Let's bring that engine to idle. We get the gear warning sounding, which makes perfect sense, so let's give a tiny bit more power. And here we go. Alright, so we did find the little hole. And we're going down right now. Alright, so let's start to prepare for our arrival real quick here. We're going to fly a couple more traffic patterns so that you guys can see how it is to fly and land this airplane. In fact, for me it is still a bit of training as well, because You saw it on the hops meter there. I did about 2 hours, 2.5 hours in the plane with some 10 traffic patterns after getting this, so it's not all that much. But let's have a little look into our destination there. Going to Deggendorf, we have Patron altitude of 2,000 feet, so let's dial the altitude target down towards 2,000. Then probably going to be runway 27. There is no weather station down there, so we don't actually know what the exact winds are going to be like. But what we do know is that, first of all, I'm about to fly into the clouds. Let's not do that. Let's fly around those. We are still VFR at this moment. So we've got runway 27 right-hand pattern, just about the Donau River. And then we are going to start our base turn just after passing that highway up here. Okay, that looks like something we can definitely do. We want to slow the plane down before we reach the pattern. And then we are about picking up a bit more ice. Let's put the defroster on, cabin heater full on. 20 degrees right now in the cabin, so the ice should clear pretty quickly once we're out of the clouds. And as we can see, that actually has happened already. So, a little disclaimer here, don't do the descents like I just did them. You would have felt this on your ears. You would really have felt it, and it would probably have hurt as well. Rates of descents like 2,000 feet a minute are something you definitely want to avoid. Basically, what we say in commercial aviation, if you fly depressurized, you don't want to do more than 1,000 feet a minute. Preferably, you want to stay in the region of 500 feet a minute in order to keep things nice on your passengers' ears. Alright, so we're below the clouds, 5,500. Let's put some power back on and get our plane towards our destination airfield. At the same time, altimeters, they were in the region of 1010 in this region today, so let's go ahead and set that. And with that, we've got a couple hills to clear up front, so I'm staying at 5,500 at the moment. Actually, I will descend to 4,500 because even VFR, we still want to fly the our target altitudes. So just like in IFR aviation, when you're going westbound, you want to fly even levels. When you're going eastbound, you want to fly odd levels. And flying VFR, we simply add 500 feet to those levels normally used for IFR operations. In other words, we are targeting 4,500 feet of altitude at the moment. Well visual with the terrain, so we can do that VFR without any problems. $10 miles to run. Let's do a little bit of mathematics here. The pattern altitude is 2,000 feet, so we need to lose 2,500 feet. 1,000 feet is around about 1 nautical mile, so overall we end up... 1,000 feet is about 3 nautical miles, of course, so we end up needing something in the region of 8 nautical miles. We're 9 miles from the destination right now, so let's keep descending here at about 1,000 feet a minute. Ground speed should be somewhere in the region of around 200 knots, as we can see. We're doing 180 indicated. Temperature is -5 at the moment in 4,000 feet. So let's dial that in. 4,000 -5, we're doing 180 knots true airspeed here. Cabin's getting hot again, so let's put that back to the middle position. We don't need the defroster anymore. Alright, so let's talk about approach and landing. The most important thing over here is to keep the airspeed under control. Your airplane got a lot of power, so by the time we enter the traffic pattern, we basically want to be at pattern altitude, of course, but we want the speed somewhere in the region of around 120 knots. And in order to get it there, let's already start reducing our power. Take 15 inches, and we'll reduce the RPMs to about 2,000. That should provide for a nice noise abatement approach over here. as we're about to fly along some inhabited areas so that we don't disturb all the lovely people down there on the ground. Apart from that, we've got 2 flap settings available. We want to use the second one on this, and since we are below 10,000 now, let's turn the oxygen off as well. Watch how this has dropped quite a bit since we spent some time above. Oh, hello there. Ring. Come on. Well, good to see that the TORS is working, the terrain awareness system. .7 miles to run. The runway is a 27, so let's go ahead and the airport's probably going to be just about here. We are about to enter the traffic pattern in the base leg, and if we have a very quick look at the chart once more, we can see that we've got this little island over there, and just prior to the island we are going to start our base turn. A few thousand feet is good, speed is coming down nicely, lights are on, fuel pump on, and we don't need the prop de-ice anymore. Alright, so let's start that base turn. I actually don't see our airport yet, but I'm sure we'll find it soon. Okay then, flaps into the first notch, landing gear down. Now it all comes down to finding that airport. And I think it's just about down here, that little strip there. So we might be a little bit high right now. Flaps full. Start the final turn.
500.
Checked. Okay, 80 knots seem to work quite well. Unfortunately, there is nothing in the manual that would tell me the exact power setting I need, or the exact approach speed, but based on experience, 80 knots typically works pretty well in this plane. Lovely little texture error just in front of the runway there. Okay, idle. Flare. Come on. And we're down. Okay, this is gonna be a touch and go. Be careful not to overboost the engine. If I just firewall the throttles, you can see how I get them above the red line there. Okay, and we are flying again. Positive rate, hit the brakes, gear up. 96 knots is a good speed. Climbing at 2,000 feet altitude once again. Start the right-hand turn. For the pattern, something in the region 2020 works quite well if you ask me. You can even go lower, you can go all the way down to something like now 17 inches. That keeps your plane nice and slow. As you can see, even right now in the pattern, we're doing some 110 knots over there, so that is quite fast, especially if you imagine being in the pattern together with a Cessna 150 or so, that's going to fly just 80 knots. So that's something to keep track of as you're flying the Bonanza, as it really means you need to keep your airplane under control. Okay, so right-hand downwind over here. This one's going to be to a full stop landing. So, flaps approach, landing gear down. Keep the pattern altitude. And then, once we are clear of the island on the right over here, we're going to start our base turn prior to overflying the village. Landing flaps, and let's start that base turn. Speed 80 knots, looks good. Starting the descent by taking a bit of power off. And then we've just about got to find that airfield again. Oh, I can see the texture error over there already. Anyway, that makes it easy to spot the plane. Sorry, to spot the airfield. Oh, quite gusty over here. Or at least quite turbulent, but that is actually not necessarily unrealistic. So that can definitely happen to you in real life as well, especially when you're flying along those forests over here. But it might be a good idea when that happens to just keep the speed a bit higher. So let's take some 90 knots over here until we are on the short final, and then we're going to start reducing our airspeed again. Okay, on final. Landing gear down, flaps full. Landing checks complete. Okay, thrust idle. Not the softest of my landings, but we're on the ground, and that is what counts. They don't have any taxiway over here, so we'll just about turn around on the runway. And here we are. Welcome to Deggendorf. After landing, thrust goes back to around 1,200 RPMs, and we'll lean the engine a bit already. Make sure not to get too quick, and then we can take the first exit over here and taxi to the apron. Oh, the windsock indicates us some easy 15 knots over there, so no surprise that we've been tossed around a little bit. Okay, we'll just about stop the plane here. We can tow it all the rest. So, park brake is set. Let's go ahead and shut it down. All the unnecessary lights can go off. Avionic master off. Flaps up. Okay, flaps are up. The avionics are off, so mixture off, props full forward, thrust levers idle, and then we can turn the alternators off, magnetos off, battery off, beacon off, and that's it. Welcome to Deggendorf. So, I hope that you've enjoyed flying with me on this brand new Bonanza. Now, I can absolutely recommend this plane. It retails at a price of just under 31 euros on the JustFlight store, and for anybody who's interested in some high-performance general aviation aircraft, this is absolutely the plane to go to. I can absolutely recommend it at this moment. I really have nothing to complain about on the plane, so I'm really looking forward to see what you guys have to say about this as well. Thank you very much for watching. Finally, if you want to support the channel, you can do so using the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below, or by becoming a channel member, which is going to grant you exclusive early access to new videos before they are released to anyone else. For now, thank you very much for watching, and I'm really looking forward to welcome you all again very soon.